You know what's funny about coolness? The people obsessing over it never quite get there. They're too busy performing, calculating, trying to manufacture an image that lands. Meanwhile, someone else walks into the room and the energy shifts. Not because they tried, because they didn't. Psychologists have spent decades trying to decode social magnetism, what makes certain people inherently compelling while others, despite all their efforts, remain forgettable. And here's what they found. Coolness isn't what you think it is. It's not confidence or charisma or any of those vague concepts self-help books sell you. It's weirder than that. The traits that actually signal coolness are often the ones people try to hide. The quirks they apologize for. The behaviors they think make them strange or difficult or too much. In this video, you'll discover 7 bizarre traits that secretly indicate you're cooler than you realize. And no, being yourself isn't one of them. That's too easy. Sign 1. You're comfortable with silence. Most people treat silence like a social emergency. The conversation lulls for 3 seconds and suddenly everyone's scrambling, throwing out random observations, asking pointless questions, filling the void with noise because the void feels like failure. You don't do that. You let the silence sit. You're not performing discomfort, trying to prove you're comfortable. You're just actually comfortable. And that makes everyone else uncomfortable in the best possible way. Here's why this matters psychologically. Research from the University of Michigan found that tolerance for conversational silence correlates strongly with emotional security and social dominance. Not dominance in the aggressive sense, dominance in the I'm not threatened by empty space sense. When you're comfortable with silence, you're communicating something profound. You don't need constant validation through interaction. You're not anxious about whether people like you. You're secure enough in your presence that you don't need to fill every moment with proof that you're interesting. Most people experience silence as social threat. The amygdala starts firing, anxiety creeps in. The inner voice whispers, "Say something, you're being awkward." Cool people have a different relationship with their amygdala. It's quiet. The silence doesn't register as threat because they're not performing for approval. And here's the paradox. The less you try to be interesting, the more interesting you become. People are fascinated by those who don't seem to need their fascination. Watch what happens in group settings. The person frantically keeping conversation alive, forgettable. The person who contributes when they actually have something to say, then settles back into quiet observation. Everyone remembers them. Silence is power when you're not afraid of it. It signals that you're more interested in genuine exchange than social performance. It says, I don't need to entertain you. I'm fine just existing here. And somehow, that makes people want to be around you more. Sign 2. You forget people's names immediately. You meet someone. They introduce themselves. 30 seconds later, their name has evaporated from your brain. Gone. Not because you're rude or careless, but because you were actually paying attention to something else. The person themselves. This might sound counterintuitive, but research on attention and memory reveals something interesting. People who consistently forget names often have what psychologists call high present moment processing. They're so focused on the actual interaction, reading facial expressions, tracking tone, feeling the energy of the exchange, that the administrative detail of the name doesn't get prioritized. Meanwhile, people who never forget names, often they're running social calculation software. They're encoding data because they're treating the interaction as networking, as future utility, as information to file away. You're not doing that. You're experiencing the person, not cataloging them, which means you might forget their name, but remember exactly how they made you feel. The specific thing they said that landed. The way their energy shifted when the conversation turned. Dale Carnegie told people to remember names because it makes others feel important. True. But there's something more authentic about someone who admits, I'm terrible with names, remind me? Than someone who mechanically recalls your name while clearly not remembering anything else about you. The coolness here is in the priorities. You're not optimizing for social efficiency. You're not treating people like data points in your network. You're present enough that the bureaucratic details slip through because you're busy actually connecting. And when you do ask someone to repeat their name, there's no shame in it. No apology. Just acknowledgement that your brain was busy processing something it considered more important than the label. People sense this distinction. They might not articulate it, but they feel it. The person who forgets your name but remembers your story? More memorable than the person who remembers your name but treats you like a LinkedIn connection. Sign 3. You have weird hobbies nobody understands. You collect vintage typewriters. You're learning Mongolian throat singing. You spend weekends building intricate miniature dioramas of forgotten industrial sites. And when people ask about your hobbies, you can see the confusion cross their faces. Good. Psychologists studying social perception have found that people with unconventional interests are rated as significantly more memorable and intriguing than those with mainstream hobbies. A 2018 study from Cornell found that individuals who pursue niche, unexplainable passions are perceived as more autonomous and self-directed, traits strongly associated with social coolness. Here's why. Mainstream hobbies feel like resume padding. I like hiking and trying new restaurants. Okay, so you're a functional human with legs and a digestive system. Congratulations. These aren't interests, they're default settings. But weird hobbies? They signal something important. They tell people you're willing to invest time and energy into something purely because it fascinates you, regardless of whether it impresses anyone or translates into social capital. You're not optimizing for broad appeal. You're following genuine curiosity wherever it leads. The coolness isn't in the hobby itself, it's in the autonomy it represents. You're not asking permission from the culture to find something interesting. You're not checking whether your passion will make sense to others before pursuing it. Most people curate their interests to be socially acceptable. They pick up hobbies that photograph well, that fit into conversational templates, that won't require too much explanation at parties. You didn't do that calculation. You just followed the pull. And here's the unexpected effect. Your weird hobby makes you more interesting than someone with objectively impressive accomplishments. The person who speaks 5 languages but learned them all for career advancement. Less compelling than the person who taught themselves one obscure dialect because they fell in love with its sound. Passion is visible. Authenticity is magnetic. And nothing signals both quite like dedicating yourself to something completely impractical that no one asked you to care about. Sign 4. You cancel plans without guilt. Friday night. You have plans. Good plans even. But when the time comes, something in you just doesn't want to go. So you don't. You cancel. And you don't spend the next 3 hours crafting an elaborate excuse or drowning in guilt. You just say no and move on. Most people experience canceling plans as a moral crisis. They'll drag themselves out, perform enthusiasm they don't feel, endure hours of discomfort because they made a commitment and good people honor commitments. They'll arrive exhausted, leave relieved, and wonder why they keep doing this to themselves. You've opted out of that contract. Research on emotional authenticity shows that people who regularly override their genuine preferences to meet social obligations report higher anxiety and lower life satisfaction. But here's the interesting part. They're not more liked for it. They're just more available. Cool people understand something crucial. Your presence when you don't want to be there benefits no one. You're not fully present. You're counting minutes. You're performing a version of yourself that's running on empty. Everyone can feel it, even if they can't name it. When you cancel plans without guilt, you're respecting something important. Your own internal weather. You're treating your energy and mood as legitimate factors in decision-making, not obstacles to overcome through willpower. This doesn't mean being flaky. It means being honest. There's a difference between someone who commits thoughtlessly, then bails constantly, and someone who commits intentionally, but reserves the right to reassess based on actual capacity. The coolness is in the boundary. You're not enslaved to past you's decisions. You're not outsourcing your choices to obligation. You're checking in with present you and making the call that's true right now. And weirdly, this makes people respect you more. Because when you do show up, they know you actually want to be there. Your presence means something because it's not compulsory. You chose it. Right now. Not 3 weeks ago when you were in a different emotional state. People who never cancel plans are everywhere. People who show up only when they genuinely want to. Rare, magnetic. Cool. Sign 5. You don't explain your choices. Someone asks why you're doing something. Could be anything. Why you're leaving the job. Why you're not drinking tonight. Why you bought that weird jacket. Why you're moving to a different city. And you just don't elaborate. It felt right. I wanted to. Just because. No justification. No defense. No three-paragraph explanation designed to convince them your decision makes sense. Psychologically, this is massive. Most people operate under the assumption that their choices require external validation. They believe they owe others a comprehensible narrative that justifies their actions. So they spend enormous energy constructing explanations, anticipating objections, defending themselves against criticism no one actually voiced. You don't do this because you understand something fundamental. Your choices don't need to make sense to anyone but you. Research on autonomy and self-determination shows that people who feel compelled to justify their decisions to others have external locus of control. They're looking outside themselves for permission to want what they want. People who simply make choices and move on have internal locus of control. They're the reference point for their own lives. This isn't about being secretive or mysterious for effect. It's about recognizing that most explanations are actually negotiations. You're trying to get the other person to agree with your choice so you can feel okay about it. But cool people don't need that agreement. They've already decided. Watch how this plays out socially. When someone asks why you're doing something, and you launch into detailed justification, you've handed them power. You've made your choice contingent on whether your explanation satisfies them. When you simply state your decision without elaboration, you retain all the power. There's nothing to argue with. No opening for them to insert doubt. The discomfort this creates in others is telling. People are used to being given explanations they can evaluate and approve. When you don't provide that, they're left with a choice. Accept your autonomy, or reveal that they think they're entitled to judge your decisions. Most people discover they're not actually entitled, and they respect you for making that clear without having to say it directly. Sign 6. You're terrible at small talk but great at real conversation. The weather, traffic, what you do for work. How about that local sports team? These conversational templates make you want to dissolve into the floor. But get someone talking about what actually scares them, what they believe about how the world works, what keeps them awake at 3 a.m., what they've never told anyone. And suddenly, you're electric. Present. Engaged in a way that small talk never accesses. This isn't social skill deficit. It's priority mismatch. Small talk serves a function. It's social lubrication, safe territory, a way to establish that you're both normal humans who can exchange predictable information without threat. Most people are excellent at it because they've practiced it thousands of times. It's comfortable specifically because it's meaningless. You find it suffocating because your brain is wired for depth. Research on personality psychology shows that people high in trait openness and low in social conformity struggle with scripted interactions, but excel in unstructured, authentic exchanges. Your nervous system literally finds surface-level interaction understimulating. The coolness here is that you're willing to skip the warm-up. You're not afraid of the deep end. When most people are still discussing parking availability, you're asking questions that require actual thought. And initially, this might create awkwardness. People aren't expecting to be asked what they'd do if they could start their life over. But here's what happens. They answer. And they're suddenly more awake than they've been in weeks. Because someone is actually asking them to think, to reveal, to be something other than the social mask they wear to every interaction. You make people feel more alive because you refuse to participate in the numbing ritual of small talk. You're demanding realness, and realness is rare enough that people remember who gave them permission to access it. The person who can discuss weather patterns at a networking event for 40 minutes? Forgettable. The person who looked at them and asked, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" That person altered their evening, maybe their week. Depth is cool because it's brave. And you're not even trying to be brave. You're just bored by everything else. Sign 7. You rarely take photos of experiences. Everyone else has their phones out. Documenting, capturing, curating the moment for later consumption and social proof. They're experiencing reality through a screen, making sure the angle is right, that the lighting works, that there's evidence this happened. You're just there. In it. Not recording. This drives some people crazy. Wait, you didn't get a picture? Like the experience doesn't count if it's not archived. Like memory alone isn't sufficient proof that you existed in that moment. But you understand something they don't. The act of documenting changes the experience itself. When you're thinking about how this will look to others, you're not fully in it. You're already outside it, evaluating it, performing it for an imagined audience. Neuroscience backs this up. Studies on memory formation show that people who photograph experiences often remember them less vividly than those who don't. The act of capturing creates psychological distance. Your brain treats the phone as external storage and doesn't encode the memory as deeply because it's assuming the photo will handle that. You're not against photos philosophically. You're just more interested in the experience than the evidence of the experience. You'd rather feel it fully than prove it happened. And here's the strange social effect this creates. People remember experiences with you more vividly. Because you weren't distracted. You were present in a way that made the moment feel more real, more significant. Your attention wasn't divided between being there and documenting being there. The coolness is in the confidence this represents. You don't need proof. You don't need to broadcast your life for validation. You're secure enough in your own experience that you don't require external confirmation that it was worth having. When the concert ends and everyone's comparing photos, you have nothing to show. But you heard things they didn't, felt things they couldn't while their attention was split. You were inside the experience while they were documenting it from just outside, and somehow, you're the one everyone remembers being there, because you actually were.